Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good. From science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure.
Well, hi, everybody. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we talk about all things good in the pursuit of the adventure of life. I'm Rafe, and it's a great Tuesday, which means it's a great day for a podcast, and a great podcast requires great listeners, and we have them, so everything is set and ready to roll. We are, because of you, a global top 10% podcast. Remember, you can reach us at bufnagle@bufnagle.com. Share the love, share the buff, give us a 5-star review, hit subscribe or like or whatever it is on your little podcast machine to let the people know that, that we're doing what we need to do to keep you happy. Tell a friend to listen and you will get a free episode. And somewhere buried in the show notes, if you go looking, you will see a link where you can buy me a coffee or whatever else you would like to send to the good people at the Buff to keep them doing the work that produces the content that you so desperately need. Hey, we have a sewing machine in our house. Our we is kind of a strong pronoun to use there. It's not really quite we as much as my wife has a sewing machine. We actually have two sewing machines. We picked one up from Michelle's mom after she passed, and that's a very, very nice, fancy, super duper Italian made, top of the line kind of sewing machine from yesteryear. It is waiting for some repairs to its sewing machine cabinet, but the machine itself is in great operating order. But the one we use most of the time is is a little, what do you say, an entry level, no, very few bells and whistles kind of, what would I say? It's a Singer, and it's a very basic sewing machine. We've had this as long as I can remember. As long as I remember being married, I remember this white sewing machine box that sits in the closet, and it gets extracted from the closet and used several times a year. It is. My wife is not a superstar seamstress. She does very well with the things that she seeks to do, which is the little things around the house that need sewing. A hem rips out and needs to be put back in. A grandchild needs some baby clothes made for a baby doll. Those kinds of things. She spends a lot of time making things like baby quilts for the church and things like that. So this sewing machine is more than sufficient for that kind of thing. It has it's got a foot pedal. It has it has a bobbin winder, which is kind of a nice thing. It apparently, if you do it right, it will self-thread it itself, which is kind of a miracle. And if you look at how it won't thread the whole machine, but you have to over this loop and around this knob and over here and under here, and if right at the end, if you do the thing right, if you turn the wheel one way and turn back the other way, this little thing comes up and pushes the thread right through the eye of the needle, which is a great thing if you are in the situation like I am. I have trouble seeing the eye of the needle and trying to get the thread in there. But we've had this sewing machine for forever. It is this has been a staple. It's moved with us, like I said, as long as I can remember it, probably 30 years plus. We've had this machine, and like I said, it's not top of the line, but it's still cranking. It's still sewing the things that it's supposed to sew. It does about maybe 8 different kinds of stitches, maybe a dozen. You turn this little knob and you get, I don't know, little straight stitches or zigzag stitches, or I don't know, whatever. See, this is where I'm in over my head with describing exactly what it does. It has a little lever you can push to do reverse stitches. So when you get to the end of the thing, you can back up a little bit. For some reason, I don't, somebody will tell me how that works. But we've had this sewing machine a long, long time, and it is used it's used, I don't want to say regularly, but it's used whenever life gives you a reason that you need to sew some things, like I said, like a hem tears out in your favorite shirt or something like that. So it's not uncommon for me to come in from the workshop someday, and the sewing machine is on the kitchen table, and my wife is making, like I said, doing little things here and there, making little things, and I hear the little whir of the sewing machine, and all is fine, and then come back a couple hours later, and it's back in the box in the closet, and it, like I said, it has been a wonderful machine, but like a lot of things in life, it sometimes doesn't get the maintenance and the love it deserves. It gets used for the task it's supposed to be used for, and then as soon as you're done, we've got to clear the table because dinner is coming. We do not have a sewing room. Basically because we don't do that enough, but that's the way the sewing machine works. So I remember not long ago, within the last, I say 3 or 4 months, I came in one time to hear the sewing machine running, and it was not the typical smooth, clear, what do I call it? It was not the standard mechanical hum of a sewing machine working under its, in its finest state. It was sounding scratchy and squeaky, and something seemed not right. And I wonder, because sometimes that can be because the thread isn't threaded right, or there's I don't know, there a button fell in somewhere and is making some noise or something. But we checked, and everything was put together the way it should be put together. Pulled out the instructions and checked all that stuff. But it was making a lot of noise, and it seemed to me like, well, it's a machine. We've had it 30 some years. I'm sure there's some grease inside. There's some oil that needs to be augmented. Things need to be made right. And when that little project was over, of course, it went back in the box because we got busy doing other things. And just last week, I came in from outside, and there was the sewing machine on the table, and my wife was busy watching a YouTube video on how to oil the sewing machine. And it was a very nice lady on the YouTube, and it was telling how to take the, there's the stuff that happens above the fabric, and the stuff that happens below the fabric, and what happens underneath the fabric in the bottom part of that arm of the machine where the bobbin is. That's where all the magic happens. Up on top, the needle goes up and down and kind of back and forth. But what happens when the needle goes underneath and the thread gets caught by this other thing and tied into this magic knot, that is a miracle of mechanical wizardry. And the lady on the YouTube was telling you how, if you have this Singer sewing machine from 1990 or whenever it was, then here's how you take the pieces out. Here's how you clean out the dust. Here's, because it gets a lot of dust and a lot of lint in there, because that's what fabric produces, right? And here's how you make it go. So she was busy oiling this thing according to the instructions and trying to make it go, cleaning out the stuff with a little vacuum cleaner, suck it up and clean it out, a little brush to clean out the pieces. We undid some screws and got it all running, all set up the way it should be going. And then she turned it on, and it still sounded like, it sounded like a sound from a horror movie is what it sounded like. And it was painful to listen to. And I said, we got to take a look at this thing. So she said, can you help with this? And I was like, yeah. I know you can tell how much I know about sewing machines, right? This last couple minutes of discussion says that my knowledge of sewing machines involves, just sending the appropriate, offerings up to the sewing machine gods and hoping that they treat me right. But I said, we'll take a look at this, because this thing was built in the early 90s, I think, or maybe even late 80s, which means it was built before a time when it was designed to be thrown away when it stopped working. So I figured it probably was serviceable. It was serviceable certainly by somebody more competent than I am, but it was also, it was serviceable. You could take the pieces off, and a sewing machine basically has, it's a metal frame that has some, an electric motor on it, some gears and some levers, some little cams that go around and around. And it's a little machine. It's not a lot different than the Ambarola that I fixed up in a recent episode. That would be episode 244. Old is New Again: Lessons Learned Restoring an Antique Phonograph. That was from June or so. Uh, it's they're mechanical, they're machines that operate, and they use some mechanical principles. So this sewing machine was designed to be fixed up and maintained. We had not done our diligence, I guess, over the last 30 years, but we don't use it that often, so it's hard to get that. But today was the day we were going to look at the sewing machine, and you come to realize there's like I said, there's this frame and all these gears and mechanical pieces inside. But then on the outside, there's a shell. There's a plastic cover held in place with some screws. And fortunately, they were screws that were designed to be removed by normal human beings. So they were just simple Phillips head screws, and they weren't seated so deep that you couldn't reach it with a regular screwdriver. They weren't some kind of strange Torx kind of screw heads or some sort of wacky hex things, or they were. This was designed to be taken apart by normal human beings, which was a great thing. So and that's where I was going to start, because you could feel when you would turn the wheel on the sewing machine, you could feel grinding at certain places in the rotation. And so my thought was, we can get the cover off. We can see which pieces are doing what at those points in the rotation, and we should be able to clean. I don't know. We'll find like I said, we'll find a button in there. We'll find an old spoon, or who knows, a mouse, something like that will be in the sewing machine. We'll start digging in there and find out what's going on. So we started taking the pieces off that come off with like little snaps. That was pretty easy. We took out a couple screws, then the front came off, which was kind of nice. The back was stuck a little bit, so because we couldn't find one of the screws. It was hiding off down in the bottom, where there was a bottom on the thing too, that the front and the back snapped into. We got those pieces off, undid some screws, some feet on the bottom, and then it wouldn't sit level, so we had to put the feet back on after we took the bottom plate off. But we got the thing apart. All right, we got the shell off. We got the feet back on. We took the thread off, and we were able to get the sewing machine in its naked form, sitting on the kitchen table. All right, and then at this point, you realize there's those multiple pieces of the shell strewn around the kitchen table, and little screws strategically located on the kitchen table to help me remember which ones go where, because they're not, even though it was built to be assembled and disassembled, they are different screws for different places. And I didn't want to mix up the screws or lose one. So that was the state we got it in. And we got it plugged in, and kept our fingers away from moving parts and away from electrical things. And we were able to get it running, and we were able to see at certain positions, this thing starts squeaking. There's some gears that are really dirty, and we cleaned them off, and we wiped down some things. And then we started investigating where's this horrendous horror sound coming from. And this was slow, and it was an investigation that was it was difficult, because there's a lot of moving parts, and some of them they're oscillatory. They kind of sit, and then they swing over and back, and then they sit and they swing over and back, and because the sewing machine is doing all sorts of very complicated, like I said, cams and rotational motion to linear motion, and it was fun to watch, but it was a little bit scary to be doing this. And of course, I didn't want to break the machine. That was the other thing, is I didn't want to get in there, and I wasn't going to take any gears apart, because I did that with an Amberola, and it took me a year to get it back together, and way too much work. So this was a little worrisome due to the complexity, and due to the fact that we had all these parts, the cosmetic parts sitting around the table. But we got it running, and we could see that it was squeaking different places. And so we kind of started at the front, I guess I'll call it the front, or the start of the drivetrain. And when I got the Amberola going, I got some sewing machine oil for that, because it's essentially the same thing. And this I don't know if you have one of these. It's a bottle, and has this long plastic straw that comes out. And I bet the internal diameter of that straw is 0.5 millimeter. So it's a very small straw. You can deliver a very precise amount of oil to a very difficult to reach location with this thing. So I said, well, here's what we'll do. We'll kind of start here on this end, and we'll kind of work our way around. Any place where we see parts rubbing against each other, we'll we'll drop a little drop of oil there and we'll see what works. And we went um, friction point to friction point to friction point going down the line here with these things. And the first 5 or 6 of them, we weren't making any progress. And finally, she saw a thing I didn't see, which was at the front of the machine, right where the needle goes up and down. There's a very significant. It looked almost like it was a copper pin running through some sort of copper housing to keep things probably nice and straight, because the pin was riding on the needle was riding on that pin. She said, "I think this is making the noise." And I said, "Well, it sure could be. Metal on metal will make noise." And this, it's like a miracle. When these things work, it's like a miracle, right? I took the little piece of straw, the straw from the bottle, and squeezed a little tiny drop of oil right on the top of that pin. And it went from, within a matter of about 4 seconds, it went from squeaky, 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 every time it was doing the squeaky thing, to just a quiet, smooth, warm, mechanical hum. And it did that hum at every speed, slow or fast, or lightning speed, or anything in between. It just did exactly what it was supposed to do. And bingo, that was the spot. And I don't really know what that thing was really doing. I think I said it was related to the needle going up and down. But finally, we got everything in its place, and it was this wonderfully warm, smooth hum from the sewing machine. And I thought to myself, this sounds exactly like it's running as its creator intended it to run. And it's back. The sewing machine is back. Hey, everybody. The sewing machine is working. And it was just this wonderful, great, joyous feeling, because I had gone from, over the course of 45 minutes, from, oh no, the sewing machine is making a terrible sound, to trying to figure out even how to take it apart to get it working. And to great joy, like I said, great joy, because things were going the way they should go, and things felt the way they should feel. And that was the same feeling I had with the Amberola when I was able to get that thing running. And I guess I think the feeling that's joy. It's capital J, joy. It is a feeling that things are as they should be, or that they are consistent with as they were designed. And it was, like I said, it was a wonderful feeling. And my wife was a little bit nervous taking this thing apart, as was I, that we have all these pieces now out on the table. And now we got the sewing machine working, but it is now a dangerous machine, because if you can't be doing fabric and sewing and stuff like that when this thing is in the state that it was in. So we still had to get this thing reassembled, which was it's difficult. You hope that you have done things right, taking it apart in the right order. And then we had to reverse it and put it back together. So take the feet back off, put the bottom plate on, make sure we use the right screws, put the feet back in there, get them lined up, put the back on, put the screws in. And some of these things looked like they were slightly adjustable. Like they could go a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right. But I tell you, we got the two shells, the front and the back, and got them, they kind of locked together. It fit perfectly. I don't know if you've ever had a thing where you try to reassemble it and it doesn't quite go together, and you're wondering, what did I miss? How did I not line up the tab A with slot B? And it was great. We like I said, step by step, reversing what we did. At the end, we got all the screws were used, all the pieces were in place, everything was clean and neat, and this thing hummed like the first day it came out of the box. And it was great teamwork, a great result. It was a very happy time, and that's the story of the sewing machine, and it bringing me great joy. Now, I've heard people say things to me when discussing stuff like, big decisions, things they've done that really have redirected their life, or they've decided to do something big to change what they were doing. They said, God told me to do this. They have said, God told me to be a pilot, or God told me to choose this school, or God told me to adopt the pet, or whatever it is. People say that. And I've always thought that was kind of a neat thing to hear. And I've never asked this before. And those of you who are out there who have God tell you things, I'd like to know what that sounds like. Because he doesn't talk to. I mean, I listen all the time, and I don't hear. I don't hear little voices. I don't hear big booming voices. I don't see signs. It's not like in Field of Dreams where a sign or a message shows up on the scoreboard and only I can see it. I don't get text messages from the divine. Uh, it's just mostly quiet. I can listen a lot, pray a lot, be in the presence of God Himself, and I'm not hearing the voices. I'm not hearing the statement, and it kind of sounds to me like Elijah when he's in First Kings. He's out in the wilderness and chapter what's this, chapter 19, First Kings, verse 11. The Lord said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, and the Lord will pass by." And there was a strong and violent wind rending the mountains and crushing rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. But after the fire, a light, silent sound. Now that's the translation that I have in my Bible, but in the King James version, there's a version that says, he said, "Go forth and stand upon the mount before the Lord, and behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind rent the mountains and brake in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice." So I'm not even hearing, I'm not even hearing the still small voice or the light silent sound, although I do hear some things. God talks to me through puzzles. Often these are what I consider to be, at the start, completely insurmountable, fully impregnable puzzles. Sometimes they look like algebra problems. Sometimes they are questions of how am I going to load all those rocks into my truck. Sometimes they are, how am I going to design this cabinet? Sometimes they are, how am I going to get this sewing machine to stop making sounds that should be used in a horror movie? But then I know now, it's taken me a long time to do this. I know now to listen to the quiet and to think, follow the process, and explore things. Look around. Step by step, the fog clears and a little light starts to shine. Night turns to dawn, dawn to day, and day to full sunshine. And then the solution is there. And it's to quote Dr. McCoy from Star Trek, the Spock's brain episode. Oh, it's so easy, a child could do it. And when I look back on the process that gets me to the solutions, and the puzzle, oftentimes I have no idea what it's going to look like, but I think I'm being directed by puzzles. And to me, the biggest puzzle to solve was the puzzle of how I'm being guided with, the biggest puzzle I've solved so far is the one that tells me that God talks to me through puzzles, because that really, because, and I think I know this because when I get to the solution, I am met with joy. So the puzzle with the sewing machine, the year-long puzzle with the Ambrola, the puzzle with designing a cabinet and bookshelf that I'm working on in the workshop, all of these puzzles, they are when the solution, it's not like it springs forth from what I'm doing. It suddenly it's there. It's like when the fog lifts and you're like, oh, well, of course, here it is. Here's the answer. Right. And like I said, the fog lifts and there's light. And, nighttime becomes dawn and dawn becomes day, and you're like, well, when did it really happen that I could start to see? And I know if I get it right, I am met with joy. And what's unfortunate is the joy is not as everlasting as I would hope it would be. It is always too transient for my likes. It fades, and then there's another puzzle awaiting me, and it's it's a never ending, right? That's the search. That's the never ending search. And I keep coming back to this thought of what were you worried about? Why did you why did you think this was so hard? And but that's how it feels at the beginning, right? When you are by yourself, un when you are uncertain, when you are worried, um, things look pretty dark. But if you trust the process, if you keep the focus on those things that are good, you things will work out. There's the line from Matthew chapter 6. I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Can any one of you be, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? And why do you worry about clothes? See how the flowers of the field grow. They do not labor or spin, yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow and is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. So I keep coming back to that when I see these. Like I don't want to say I was nervous for working on the sewing machine, but it was one of these things I wasn't planning on doing it. And this is the kind of thing, that it can turn into several weeks, or it could turn into a year when you take apart the Ambarola. And I just didn't want that. My wife had some stuff that needed to be sewn. I think it was a hem on some towels or something like that had to be fixed up. And I thought, I just don't want this to be drawn out into an insolvable problem that's going to take me. I'm going to have to get a degree in mechanical engineering to get this thing fixed. But like I said, I was worried at the start. But then as time goes on, the light, the fog clears and the light shines through. So you have to trust that all shall be well. And then the final one that I've come to is this concept of not my will, but yours be done. And sometimes the answer will be that, you know what, you're not going to get the answer now. I'm not going to let you solve the puzzle now. And that's a really hard one because I don't like to not have the puzzle solved. But that's sometimes you need to concede to what is not your place. So we have to do that. Well, we now have a quiet, smoothly running sewing machine, and the towels all have their proper hems. Listen for the whisper. Listen for the still, small voice. The answers will be revealed to you if you keep your focus oriented toward the ultimate good. So remember, seek the good. Live virtuously and flourish and enjoy the adventure of life.
It's going to be a great day.